you're going to come out later in age when you finish. But it turns out that underrepresented minorities tend to take a very different route, and it looks more like this. So it has two institutions. We all had all of you had two institutional transitions, so your undergrad and then your graduate institution. But most underrepresented minorities actually take 3 or more institutional transitions. They'll end up in a PhD program at one institution, but don't end up getting the PhD from that institution, but going to another institution to get their PhD. In reality, that actually looks more something like this. So if you ended up with a master's degree somewhere and you had to go to another institution to start your PhD, they usually will not transfer your credits, and so you have to start at the beginning again. And so you can just elongate this down to 15, 20 years, and it's taken away some of the potential of that future scientist. We know this because of a longitudinal study done by Sheila Lang for a PhD. This is about 81,000 PhDs. This is PhDs in the STEM fields primarily. And these are the pathways that she studied. So this is these are the less traditional routes. This is where you actually stay at your bachelor degree institution and get your PhD. How many people did that? 1, 2. It's a very low number of things, but it happens. And sometimes you get a master's, sometimes you don't in that process. These are rare cases. This is the one that we're more familiar with, where you go to a different institution to get your PhD. And this is where you don't get a master's, and this is where you do get a master's in a way. But these are the traditional routes. The 2 colors are showing you white Asian populations, and then the darker color is showing you the URMs. And you can see that here they outpace the white and Asian population quite a bit. So this is statistics from the APS. This is all of the PhDs in the STEM fields, physics degrees specifically. So this plot here is showing you the percentage. This is for white and Caucasians. And then I'm showing you here a zoom in of this little region here of the percentage of PhDs in physics that are awarded to different ethnic categories that I have listed here. The black bars are showing you what the population of the United States is in percentage. So you can see that for Hispanic Americans, very few of the population that could be pursuing degrees in those fields are actually pursuing degrees in those fields. For Asian Americans and for white Caucasians, there are many more that are actually receiving the PhDs. So that's the problem in a nutshell. And some people have pointed to this before, that some of the problem comes from applying a flat criteria to a GRE test. The GRE scores are shown here for these same different groups, showing you that if you actually apply a criteria for a GRE, which we don't do here anymore, and a lot of other schools are stopped doing, that you will actually reproduce that diagram that I showed you before, where you will have fewer and fewer underrepresented minorities in your program. But this study by Lang actually was only studying people who actually got their PhDs. And the thing that's not there are the people who didn't get their PhDs, the people who went to a master's program and left with a terminal master's. And I wonder if anyone knows how successful all PhDs are at completing their PhD. Does anyone hazard a guess? 75%?
25%.
25% is really low. That would be terrible. So it's close to 50. It's 58%. So 58% of the people who enter a PhD program actually come out with their...
this is over what fields?
All fields, all PhD fields. The study is actually behind... I've actually tried to find the study to see if they break it down by category, but it's hard to actually locate the study. But so what's happening is that our PhD program is actually not, the process that we have in place is not very successful at all. And so all the metrics that we've been using are pretty miserable if you're doing a coin flip of who's going to succeed at their PhD. And these things conspire. It's hard to get actually information because this is very anecdotal because you saw the tiny number of people that are in there. So I talked to this one fellow about their experience. I've anonymized them for obvious reasons. But they're from Texas. They started at a community college. And I talked to them about why they started at a community college. And it was because their high school counselor, they went to a very underperforming high school, laughed at them when they told them that they wanted to be scientists. And so they went to study accounting. In accounting, they encountered an enthusiastic astronomy professor and changed their trajectory to do astronomy. Transferred to another university in Texas. This is all undergraduate, by the way. Got their undergraduate degree and then started graduate school at one institution in New York. Left and started at another one and finished there, and then went on to do postdocs. So they actually did make it through at the end. So their path kind of looks something like this. And in this entire region here, I mean, they were at constant risk of not actually succeeding to the PhD program. They didn't go through a bridge program, this person, but it's me. They didn't go through a bridge program, but they learned about the bridge programs. And as soon as they learned about it, they applied for this position because they wanted to be part of the solution that helps students. And the way that bridge programs are actually structured is they're built so that mentorship is the key. And so it's really stressing that you can grow a scientist into a PhD. You don't have to have some innate abilities, but you can actually be learned, taught, and mentored and supported through that process. And that's the way the bridge programs are intended to work. It's not perfect for everyone. Obviously, it's not going to work for everyone exactly right like it should. There are always going to be problems, but that's the attempt. And that's the attempt that the Fitz Vanderbilt Bridge program started based on this. And so the way they did it is by partnering with a master's granting institution, which is a historically black college, Fisk University. And in Vanderbilt, the students would then transfer into a PhD program at Vanderbilt after 2 years of doing their master's. The whole time they're supported and mentored, and they're given professional development. That program then inspired the APS Bridge program, which is a wider program mostly for physics PhDs, and they're spread around the country. These are two programs that focus on getting students to get PhDs. There are also programs that take postdocs and give them research opportunities so that they can be more competitive for PhD programs in the future. And that's like the Columbia Bridge program. And there's a program at MIT actually for physics students as well. But the focus is on mentoring. And so the diagram is like this. It's a little bit, you're protected, you're sheltered, but you're also given the building skills to actually help you survive in the environment, because the environment is not the best environment, to be honest. I mean, it's hard for some people to encounter a very different community than they're used to growing up at home in their neighborhoods. So that's why bridge programs are here, and that's why I think they're successful. I myself have latched on into this part here, and I bring students here to the SAO to work with scientists. With Fisk Vanderbilt Bridge students, graduate students, they come here for summertime, they start research projects, and then they build relationships with people here at the institution. And I think that's all I have time for.
Thank you so much, Rudy. Just a quick question. Based on your experience, would you assign more significance to the talent or to the persistence of a student in a successful career? Is it more of a character?
I think it's about letting someone realize their potential, and I think that most of the infrastructure that we have now does not allow someone to do that necessarily. It's not necessarily the fault here at this level. It could be that they were not prepared early on, but they can get up to speed. You have to take that into account, that not everybody went to a high school where their counselors promoted them into the field, or where they could actually take AP classes, or where they actually had courses beyond calculus.
So we might be missing a lot of talent out there that was not,
Definitely.
didn't start right.
Yeah.
Yes? Go ahead.
So the efforts to standardize these paths among racial groups or racial ethnic groups in post-secondary education are obviously really important, but I'm wondering if it would be more efficient to focus on K through 12 and before these gaps accumulate, the gaps that are being shown in the NAEP assessments that you take as in elementary school to junior high to the SAT and then to the graduate exams, these gaps are all pointing in the same direction and they're getting larger as you go through. So it seems like it's more efficient to have the entry point being on programs that enter in at the middle school level, for instance, prep for prep. I grew up in New York City, and there are unfortunately a small number of very competitive programs that offer this mentorship and guidance at that stage, but that was very instrumental in my path, and I mean, I ended up doing the more traditional paths, even though I was like only a quarter physics major and I got a bunch of excellent degrees, but I did the bachelor's to PhD plus other stuff in 10 years, and obviously knowing the mechanics of it, knowing what's necessary, knowing what an RUU is, and knowing what who to ask for letters, and all these things are things that different populations have differential access to, but having that access in advance streamlined the process tremendously for me.
I think that's true. So the institutions that have the most resources are going to have the students that have the best opportunity to get that support at the early phases. And that's I agree that we should be focusing more attention there, but that's a much larger task if you think about the sheer number that you're talking about. And so,
but I think it's really the only stable long-term solution, because if you're trying to patch up gaps that are extremely, they're very substantial at this level, I don't think it's a long-term solution to just try to come up with
definitely.
criteria. And
the long-term solution is to start like with the parents when they have their children and tell them these are career outcomes for STEM, and STEM is an achievable thing, even though you've never done it in your entire life. That's the starting point every time. But that's the U.S. Education Department. I don't want to touch right now.
So I remember seeing online that, for example, Princeton University recently started a small physics program in astrophysics for 2 students a year. Do you see a lot of other top-ranked universities creating these programs in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think they should. I think what they all should do is actually focus more on mentoring and less on having stellar students that you don't actually have to do anything with, that you just get a good student and they do everything and you don't even touch them. Those are the people, when we think of good students, that's what we think of, but that student had mentoring in the past that other students didn't have, and they didn't just come out of the womb that way, they were actually nurtured early on. And I think that every program should be focusing on mentoring and building mentoring networks, and that's the key to success for students. The retention rate for the FISC Vanderbilt Bridge program is 80 to 90% compared to the 60% that the global PhD programs passes. So I think that mentoring is the focus, and teaching that and making us better mentors to those students is where everyone can improve their PhD program, regardless of if they're specifically for underrepresented minorities or just everybody. Even at the undergraduate level.
Last comment, Anna?
Yes, so just to follow up on that, do you have any general recommendations for mentoring, or how to implement this sort of mentoring in astronomy environments, even astronomy departments outside of those bridge programs?
Yeah, so actually it's closed down, but there is a toolkit that you can download from the FISC Vanderbilt Bridge program, and in it has a bunch of rubrics and guides for mentorship. How do you actually hold your mentorship meetings, what you should actually be talking to the student about. It actually helps you figure out whether a student is succeeding in this area or that area and how to better focus it. So that's one way. Another way is there's the National Mentoring Network, which is a nationwide program, and they have annual or biannual meetings that are really, I've attended a few of them, and they're superb as far as like getting up to speed on a lot of ideas. Because there's no like one fix for everyone, but you can't make someone an extrovert if they're an introvert. So you have to learn how to work in those different interpersonal relationships.
So Rudy, just to summarize, we have one message to you: keep doing what you're doing. It's very important. Thank you very
Thanks.
much.